Hello, my friends and new preppers. This is the art of prepping. So you're just getting started into prepping, and you're new to all this. This is all overwhelming. I get these messages from time to time that they don't know, or people don't know where to start. It's totally understandable. This is not like you get any type of training in school. Most families don't have a regimen of being prepared, and so it's a bit of a shock to the system. So this is the beginner's guide to emergency preparation and to prepping. This is going to be a step-by-step approach, and we'll have about 17 steps to go through. This will be very simplified for you. The first time you might want to listen to the video and just sit back and just take it in. The second time you may want to bring a piece of paper and a pen to jot down notes, especially if you're new to this, and this is completely foreign to you. So we'll just go ahead and get right into it. Step one, to have an alternate shelter option. This could be a tent or tarp shelter or something of that nature in case your home was compromised and you can't live in it and you were not able to get to a bug out location. Step two, a water storage and filtration. You want to have at least a minimum of 3 gallons per day for each person in the home for the time period you need. With all these steps, your first goal is to get at least 3 days, and then keep increasing it to at least you get to a 2 week, about 2 weeks or so. And of course, you want more down long-term goals could be more than 2 weeks. Water storage, though, you'd probably have 3 gallons per person per day. Of course, for 3 days, when you first start, you can put that water into 1 gallon, 5 gallon. They have 6 and 7 gallon, water jugs. BPA free, you can get those kind of things at like Walmart or other sites online. Filtration, you should probably have an independent hand pump filter system. They don't cost that much. You can get the camping style, the backpacking style hand pumps. They just weigh usually under a pound, and they have the ability to filter out all the nasties in your water. And so that would be important if something was compromised, or if you had compromised water in your water lines in your home, and you needed to do something about that, without, having to boil your water. Because sometimes boiling the water doesn't really get rid of the impurities. The next thing would be step 3, and that's food storage. Have a small cache of ready-to-eat foods. The more you do the prepping, you probably want to get into more long-term foods. But if your food supply is only made up of 3 days' worth of food, then having things that are easy to eat, like canned goods for your pantry. They have the pop tops, things that you don't require any cooking. It could be a lot of energy bars and protein bars and things like that for your bag systems. Step 4 is alternative cooking options. This is not the most immediate thing you would need to do, but this is something though that you want to consider as you get a little bit more progressed in your food storage, to have another means of cooking besides just your stove in your home. It could be a camp stove, though, or a grill outside. If so, you may want to get an extra propane tank just for that, for emergencies. Step 5, 3 means to make fire. This sounds common sense, but this just kind of reiterates the need of having redundancy in your systems. So having some matches, a ferrocerium rod, and a lighter would satisfy that category. And you might as well also have a small tinder kit just to help those flames catch and to start and make fires. Step 6 is to have a first aid kit. This gear is no good if you don't have the skills and the knowledge of how to use it. So go ahead and get trained at maybe your local fire department or Red Cross or whatever's in your area to learn how to do basic first aid, CPR, to use an AED system, and to do like the Heimlich maneuver and other basic type of skills. In terms of your first aid kit, buy the one that you can afford, the best quality that you can even afford, and to add a few other extra items in there, or if you can't afford, just go ahead and buy out a trauma kit to go with your basic first aid kit. Step 7 is your personal protection options. I can't dictate, what that's going to be, since I don't know where you're living and your rules and regulations, but just know that you should be proficient in whatever you choose, be it a handgun or a bat or a knife, or even if it's just hand-to-hand combatives. Step 8 is your hygiene kit. Besides just soap and having a stockpile of extra blankets or towels for an emergency, you're going to want to have some wet wipes and you're going to have some alcohol-based hand sanitizer and other kind of things that would help you stay clean if you didn't have a lot of water. The next step 9 would be the lighting options. A lot of people think that you just get a couple flashlights and you're good to go. The first thing you'd get is a nice headlamp. Everybody in the family should have a headlamp, their own personal lighting device, to help navigate throughout the night if they need to get up and do things. After the headlamp, you get a nice aerial light for the family. 1 or 2 nice flood lanterns would be recommended. And then maybe after that, get a nice spotlight. If everybody after that would want to have a secondary light, maybe a small handheld flashlight could be an option. The next step, number 10, would be basic toolkit. This is pretty much common sense, to work on your car or to do basic home repairs. You can basically just go out, and this is kind of a one-shop type of item. You can pretty much get most things in very nice or even mid-sized toolkits. Pretty much have the majority of what you need. But just don't forget to supplement things like hammers and maybe a sledgehammer as well. Maybe some kind of pry bar, bolt cutter, wire cutter, saws, just basic things like that. Maybe a small hand axe. So those are the kind of things you would want to have. The next item would be number 11, and that's the bug out bag. Now, this is a very detailed type of thing. I have a whole series on how to build your bug out bag and the philosophies behind that. The bug out bag, though, really is something that is just a replica of everything you need and things in your home that you need, but miniaturized for approximately 3 days. Some people put more than 3 days worth of supplies, but for the goals of this particular project, let's just work for 3 days. And so feel free to look at my other videos on that and to look up bug out bag and to learn about the categories of what's in the bug out bag. And for the most part, it mimics everything in all the categories that you have for preps that we're talking about here, with the exception of a few extras such as navigation and signaling. And so what we have here next would be the number 12, which is the emergency fund. To have 1 to 3 months of all expenses in your savings for emergency is critical. You never know when you could lose your job or be severely injured. This is something that cannot be underestimated. It is more recommended, though, to have 3 to 6 months worth of all your expenses, especially if you work in a very volatile industry or have a propensity to lose your job. Step 13 is have communications. Comms are going to be very critical to know what's going on around you. And an AM and FM radio band radio is very excellent. I'd also get one that has the NOAA weather bands. And if you can even go a little bit further and have the funds, get the shortwave bands also built in that radio. This radio needs to be have several options to power besides battery and a wall adapter. You need to have the ability to crank, to use a hand crank, and a lot of them now come with solar panels also. So have the means, they have anywhere from like 3 to 7 different power options these days on these emergency radios. Steps 14 is to have a bug out and a bug in plan. If you don't know what to do with your gear, you won't know how to deal with these emergencies. So having these plans on how you're going to egress, and if you don't egress and you shelter in place, how are you going to deal with that per contingency of per emergency? And also get to know about what kind of emergencies and things happen in your area. You probably already know that. You know if you have snow emergencies or if you have ice storms, you know what to do, and you probably know the frequency of power outages in your area. So plan accordingly. Step 15 is several means to get to your bug out location, to egress to a safe location. And this is obviously most people would say, well, I'd obviously, drive there. And by all means, if you can, that's great. But you may want to see, can you get there by foot if you had to? It may be too far. Maybe a bicycle, maybe a moped. Can you get there with that? An ATV. Is there any way to get there by boat? So these are some things to look at, having different means. I'd have at least one backup means, and for a lot of people, it could be a bicycle. And the next step, number 16, is having several routes to get to your bug out location. So you should know how to, to do it, get there from different angles, for different directions. And so try to put that in a map. It's good to even have a map that's dedicated just for bug out. And, during a crisis, you may not be thinking very clearly of how to get there. I know that sounds kind of odd, but people don't think clear and when they're under stress. So having especially if you don't go to this location very often, this is going to be important to have a good map. And lastly, it's going to be having redundant supplies at your bug out location that mirrors the different categories that we just talked about that are priorities in your home. You'd want to shoot for 3 days at first, but maybe several weeks long term, and even more so if you get more advanced into prepping. Now, you may say, well, I don't have a bug out location. I can't afford another home. I can't afford a cottage or maybe a lake home. I can't afford even a piece of property out in the woods somewhere. This is no problem. You can designate maybe a bug out location, maybe at a friend's or family's home. And what you can do is just buy maybe 2, 4, 6 lockable tote boxes and put a lot of your redundant supplies, some of the same supplies or these same supplies that you would have at your bug out location as if you had another location of your own. You can put that supplies and organize it nicely in these totes and ask them if they could store it maybe in their basement, which would probably be the most ideal and temperature controlled area in a home if they had an extra space open there, maybe in a garage, or if there's a more climate controlled shed or barn system, maybe there as well. But you can stash things there, so if God forbid something happened and you had a total loss, such as maybe a house fire, and there was nothing left, at least you would have a few tote boxes of gear and possessions so that you wouldn't have a literal total loss. With that, though, thank you for listening to this video about these basic primer steps here, the beginners movement step by step toward being more prepared. I wish you the very best, and Godspeed.